The story of the 1995 Formula One World Driving Championship was filled with action, drama, controversy, and triumph. Today, the story begins anew. A new season and a new series. Welcome to Formula One 96. On a warm and breezy early fall afternoon down under, welcome to a new season of the Formula One World Driving Championship. There is so much that is new this season. New cars, new faces, and a new venue for the season opening Grand Prix of Australia, Albert Park in Melbourne, Australia. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Welcome to what promises to be a most interesting Formula One season. Today it is the Grand Prix of Australia on the Pacific Rim in the city of Melbourne, hosting its first championship Formula One event, although there were non-championship events held in the 50s in Albert Park. It is a unique racing circuit, and it should provide an outstanding show. You're watching live as two-time defending world champion Michael Schumacher prepares to fold himself into his new car, a Ferrari, that is placed on the second row for today's race, and therein lies a story. With me to bring you live coverage of today's race, former Formula One racer and now IndyCar standout Eddie Cheever. Eddie, it's a very unique circuit, blending both the temporary nature of a park circuit and the permanent nature of a road racing circuit. And before we even get this race started, it has already seen history.
It absolutely has, with Jacques Villeneuve being on pole position. He's one of the only 4 drivers in the world that have done that. And I think it's tremendous that the reigning IndyCar champion would qualify for pole at his first event. Unique circumstances, brand new track, but I think it's going to be a tremendous race.
No question about it. Ferrari's on the second row, but the front row is all Williams, and they have put together perhaps the toughest 1-2 driver punch in the series. The new element is Jacques Villeneuve, son of the legendary Gilles Villeneuve, and an IndyCar champion in his own right, and he is under no illusions about his new career.
IndyCar was a bigger challenge because I jumped from the Atlantics to IndyCar right away, and it has 3 times the horsepower. But definitely F1 is going to be a huge challenge. It's a whole lot of new drivers, new teams, new tracks. It's probably a little bit dirtier than IndyCar as well.
But the bottom line is Villeneuve is still a rookie and inexperienced. Not so his teammate Damon Hill, who must deal with the pressure of being the preseason favorite for the championship.
No, I certainly don't discount Ferrari or Benetton or even perhaps McLaren. And there's going to be a very tight fight, I think, this year for the championship.
No question about it. With Villeneuve and Hill in the Williams Renaults, it is going to be an exciting season. We are just moments away from the opening round of the World Championship, and there you see just a touch of the new profile of Formula One, those high cockpit sides to prevent the driver's head from moving in a high impact situation. We'll be talking about that as the day goes on. There is Eddie Irvine. What is the surprise from the Irishman? He has out-qualified his teammate, the vastly more highly paid world champion Michael Schumacher. We have a great race in store here in Melbourne, and a perfect day for it. Stand by. We're just moments away from the start of the race. Welcome back live to Melbourne, Australia, where the elaborate new starting procedure for Formula One standing starts now in 1996 is just moments away. While we have a moment, let's take a look at the starting grid for today's race. On the pole, as you see, only the fourth driver in history to take pole in his first Grand Prix, Jacques Villeneuve, starting alongside teammate Damon Hill. Row 2 will be Eddie Irvine, who has outqualified Michael Schumacher. Mika Hakkinen and Jean Alesi will be on row 3. Row 4, Gerhard Berger in the Benetton and Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan. Row 5 will be Heinz-Harald Frentzen for Sauber and Mika Salo for Tyrrell. On row 6, Olivier Panis in the Ligier Mugen Honda alongside the footwork cart, the only V8 in the field other than the Fords, that is Jos Verstappen. On row 7, David Coulthard, who did not have a good qualifying session in his first race with McLaren, and the Sauber Ford of Johnny Herbert. Row 8 will be Yukio Katayama. Tyrrell, the only team with the same two drivers they finished last season with, and Giancarlo Fisichella, a rookie with the Minardi team. On row 9, Pedro Lamy with the Minardi, next to the footwork card of Ricardo Rosset, a rookie from Brazil. On row 10, Martin Brundle, who had a horrible qualifying yesterday for Jordan Peugeot, alongside Pedro Diniz in the Ligier Mugen Honda. As you take a look at Jacques Villeneuve, the pole man in his very first Formula One race, you can wonder what is going through his mind. We should also point out, if you were with us for our debut of Formula One qualifying coverage here on the Deuce, under the new 107% rule that requires you qualify within that percentage of the pole time, the 40 Fords of Luca Badua and Andrea Montermini did not qualify for today's race. Badua missed it by a heartbreaking 0.4 of a second. Now, Eddie Cheever, let's talk a little bit about the racetrack. 3¼ miles around, roughly 16 turns as we get set for 58 laps of racing, but it is a very, very quick circuit.
It's a very quick circuit, especially if you consider the fact that they're only racing on it once a year. Normally these street circuits are not that fast because they have to make room on in very small areas. But it is definitely a circuit. It's definitely a circuit that you can get your rhythm into it, and that is what the beauty of the circuit, because it has so many fast corners. Normally these circuits are very difficult, they're all stop and go, but when we looked at the qualifying yesterday, it was exceptional. It was exciting to see these drivers be able to bring the cars right to the limit, and that was mostly because of the track configuration. But it is a brand new track, it is very green, it's very dusty, and lots of people have been spinning in conditions that are far from optimal. And even this morning, I think somebody had some problems in the pits when they were practicing their pit stops. They came in and they, I think it was Alesi who came in and missed his point, hit somebody in the pits and hurt one of his pit crew's knees.
Tweaked a knee on one of his pit crew members. Fortunately, that man is all right. You look down on Mika Hakkinen, a medical miracle in 1996. Recall the final race of 1995 back in November on the streets of Adelaide, a 125-mile-an-hour shunt. He cracked his skull, and for a while, folks were worried about Mika Hakkinen's life, more so than his career. But he has made a remarkable recovery, had some astonishing testing performances, and he is back in the McLaren Mercedes-Benz, of which so much is expected this year. A new look for Benetton, new drivers everywhere. In fact, of the 20 drivers qualified for this race, only 8 are in the seats they occupied at the end of last year. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we are going to start Formula One races in 1996. It is very complicated. 17 minutes prior to the formation lap, there's been a series of countdowns with red lights and horns to make sure everyone stays awake and perhaps keep the confusion to a minimum. The green lights will start the formation lap, and that is the last time green lights will be seen in the process. When all the cars are back in position on the grid, a 5-second signal is given by a set of 5 red lights. As each second goes by, they extinguish one set of red lights after another, which will give us all a nice 5 count to an unpublished preset race start time. And when the red lights go out at the end of that procedure, there will be no green light. The race has begun, and I guess that is the end of an era in Formula One. No flags, no green lights. When the reds go out, away we go. The drivers were very confused by this new process, Eddie.
I'm very confused just sitting here. I know one thing. I don't know who developed that starting procedure. I'm sure they did it with all the best thoughts in mind, but it for sure wasn't a racing driver. What happened to the old turn the green light off, don't turn the red light off and get the green and let's get going? I think somebody has gotten a little bit overcomplicated here. It's probably because of all the problems they had last year, people anticipating the starts. And the start of the race is probably one of the most dangerous parts of the race. They're trying to find a system to eliminate that, but somebody might have gone a little bit too far on this.
Now let's talk a little bit about the driver changes for 1996. Here's a look at the teams, the drivers that are out, and those that have replaced them. For Ferrari, Berger and Alesi are gone. Schumacher and Irvine are in. At Benetton, Schumacher and Herbert are gone. Berger and Alesi take over those 2 seats. At Williams, David Coulthard is gone. Jacques Villeneuve is very much in. McLaren, Mark Blundell is off to IndyCar Racing. David Coulthard slots into his seat. At Jordan, Eddie Irvine has moved to Ferrari. Martin Brundle is there. At Sauber, Jules Bouillon is now the test driver for the Williams team, and Johnny Herbert has the seat. At Ligier, Martin Brundle is gone. Pedro Diniz brings about $10 million in personal sponsorship to the team. At Footwork, Taki Inoue and Gianni Morbidelli are both gone, replaced by rookie Ricardo Rosset and the 23-year-old sensation of Formula One a couple of years ago, Jos Verstappen of the Netherlands. Good view from high overhead. Very shallow lake on the infield. Albert Lake, only about 3 feet deep. Perfect for the interior of a racetrack. The drivers to a man love the circuit. Slightly bumpy in a couple of braking areas, but Eddie, I would guess it's destined to be a classic street racing circuit in the future.
Absolutely. It always happens when they build a new circuit. The FIA always gets better every time they build one, and this circuit really speaks volumes for all the experience that the FIA has had building circuits. There have been a few complaints. Berger had a complaint about 1 or 2 corners where he couldn't see the apex of the corner, but I think they'll be able to work all that out. It's beautifully, Australia is probably one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and they have done a tremendous job putting this racing circuit right in the middle of Melbourne. It's going to be a great race today, and I think everybody has said that Damon Hill is the favorite, and for a very obvious reason. He's one of the best drivers and probably the best team, and he's been there for a long time.
Problem right here. Heartbreak for Heinz-Harald Frentzen of Germany. The Sauber with the new 10-cylinder Ford Cosworth has come to a stop at turn 3. That is very bad news for him. Meanwhile, Pedro Lamy in the Minardi will start from the pit lane, having suffered mechanical complications as the field rolled off. Here's a look at our weather conditions. Very warm at 76 degrees. The drivers say the track does not react well to heat. It gets very slippery. The humidity quite high for the 90 minutes or so of hard racing yet to come.
Now the pole sitter has tested these starts all throughout the winter. He's probably done 10 of them, 20 of them, 30. I don't know how many, but nothing is like his first Grand Prix. He's never done this with all these cars around him.
For the first time, the first of 16 races in 14 countries in 1996, we are moments away from the first start of the season. Turn up the volume. Enjoy the revs of Formula One power. Jacques Villeneuve is on the right, on pole. The first turn will be a sharp right-hander. We are away.
Villeneuve has gotten an excellent start.
The 2 Williams, 1 and 2. Oh, and Damon Hill gets sideways, and one of the Ferraris ducks underneath. And they get past. Damon Hill has shunted back to 4th place. Oh, we have a spinner in the middle and a huge flip. That's one of the Jordans. A tremendous crash.
That is a terrible accident. He did quite a few yards on his roof. That is not a very good position to be in. The fire marshals have to get there quickly because this is when cars have a bad habit of burning.
Now, Formula One cars this year are required to have fuel vents that do not allow the fuel to leak when the car is inverted. That is fine. Martin Brundle, and it appears he is all right.
He's had a terrible weekend. He had a very bad weekend in qualifying and is right at the start of the race. I think one of the McLarens went sideways and he got collected in somebody else's accident, which is always very, very annoying. You can see it in the back of the screen.
Watch the car.
Yes, it's a McLaren.
Coming up fast from the rear, you see he gets into the back of the McLaren, and to the right, I believe that's one of the Saubers, and catapults over it, held in by the debris fences with lots of runoff room into the gravel trap.
It was Coulthard's McLaren. It looked like he had locked up his rear brakes, or somebody had hit him from the back in the braking zone, and he lost control of the car. And probably if he hadn't have hit that car, he would have gone into the wall himself. Look at the mess that this car's in.
The car has broken in half, it would appear, at the firewall where the engine joins the rest of the chassis.
Martin is a very lucky boy today. But these cars now are built in such a safe manner. That's a very good example of why so much time and effort is spent preparing the cars for the accidents. These accidents happen so rarely, but they're built in such a manner they can absorb all of that impact. When you see pieces flying off a car, that's a good sign. The worst sort of an accident you can see is when the accident happens and everything just stops within 10 feet. But when the car rolls and the back end falls off and the tires fall off, what's happening is the car's decelerating at a very slow pace.
Now we have a red flag. Even though the car flipped well off the racetrack, there was other damage, lots of debris, and the race has been stopped. Watch once again. You see Brundle rushing up on the right side of the racetrack, and then chaos breaks out in front of him. He can't get the car stopped. And when these open-wheeled cars touch one another, he goes flying, and you can see it broke when it landed.
Yeah, it broke when it landed.
Gary Anderson and the rest of the Jordan team built a very strong car, but that is the greatest testament you could have to the force of that accident.
But his capsule is intact. The driver's capsule is completely intact. The rollover hoop has not broken. And I have no idea whatsoever why the whole back of the car came off. The only time I've ever seen that happen was with Watson in the 80s in Monza when he spun coming out of Lesmo. And the whole car had cut itself in half.
This reminds me of a crash we saw Mauricio Gugelmin involved in at the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard a few years ago. Flying over the heads of other drivers, landing on the roll bar. As you mentioned, the driver capsule, to which so much attention was paid during the off-season by the Permanent Safety Commission, that required stringent new crash tests for both front and side impacts in Formula One cars this year. It was Mika Hakkinen's McLaren that ran afoul of, it would appear, one of the Benettons, either Alesi or Berger. But look at Martin Brundle's flight.
Not a good way to start the season.
Oh my. There you see the scene of the accident. That was down in turn number 3. Meanwhile, the rest of the field has come around to a stop. In a moment, we'll do it all again. Stay with us for more live from Australia. Back live at the Grand Prix of Australia, on board with Damon Hill as Jacques Villeneuve smokes the tires from pole position and rockets into the lead. It was a Williams 1-2 briefly, but watch this first corner as Damon Hill briefly loses control and finds himself in a fight for position with the 2 Ferraris coming up from behind.
Villeneuve did a tremendous start there. Tremendous start. This young man has the ability to think very coolly. He was just repeating the same starts he had done in practice, and it looked like it made no difference to him at all. There were 20 other cars on the grid with him, and I think that is the sign of an excellent racing driver.
Eddie Irvine and Michael Schumacher both made their way by, demoting Damon Hill to 4th place. And this is the corner at which Martin Brundle suffered a savage accident, launching his Jordan into the air. There is the rear of the car, the engine, which of course is a fully stressed part of the chassis, and the rear differential, the rest of the driveline. A moment ago, they picked up that rear of the car with the tow truck hook, and there was no fuel dripping out of it, which was pretty astonishing. Take another look at Damon Hill right there, just getting that little bit sideways. Eddie Irvine had a run at him.
He almost lost it. He came very close to losing it. It looked like his brakes, he had a little bit of problem under braking. The back end was a little bit loose going in, and when he touched the power, the back end just kept on sliding. And Eddie Irvine has already had Schumacher gnawing at the back of him at the start of the race. And Irvine is definitely not sitting around waiting for something to happen. He went past Hill as if he was standing still. But look how intact that is. That is the most important part as far as the racing cars there are no pieces left on it. There's only one piece of suspension, but the whole driver's enclave is in perfect condition.
Now notice those high sides to the left and right of the driver. Those are a new development required on Formula One cars this year. 22 centimeters below the top of the roll hoop is what the rule says. That is the yellow line. Now this weekend, the Jordan team came under fire for using the back of the roll hoop, the red line there, as the reference point, so to speak, for their cockpit sides. Several of the teams complained, arguing that there might be an aerodynamic advantage in that. But right now, I bet Martin Brundle is glad he had every centimeter of that protection.
This is something that Indy cars is actually given to Formula One, because Indy cars have had those high sides in the car for quite some time. They've taken it one step farther. But I think actually in this accident, I don't really think Martin was going to have any lateral problems. That helps you. That would have saved Senna's life probably in the accident, in the very unfortunate and stupid accident that happened in Imola. That is something that would have saved his life. And I am always very grateful to the officials when they force the teams to make changes in the cars that cost everybody money because they're new and they have to make new cars. But racing always has to be progressing in safety. They always have to do something every year to make the car safer. And now with Formula One, they even have more drivers getting involved in it, which I think is a very positive thing. Gerrit Berger, who has a lot of experience, has been spending a lot of time speaking to the FIA on how to approach the circuits and giving a driver's perspective, which I think is very important, since it is the driver who's in the car and it is the driver who has the accident. Everybody always tends to forget that. I used to have horrific arguments with Balès when I was in Formula One, because they were passing down rules to us without ever asking the racing drivers. And the racing driver is actually the one that has to take the brunt of the accident.
Well, perhaps the most remarkable thing of all as you watch Jacques Villeneuve sitting in his car awaiting the restart, which is now about 10 minutes away. Martin Brundle has been checked and cleared by the track doctors and the Formula One doctor, Sid Watkins. He will climb into the spare Jordan and take his place on the grid for the restart. Amazing. We'll be back live to Melbourne in just a moment. Well, Eddie Cheever perhaps said it best. Martin Brundle has been having an absolutely horrible first weekend of his Formula One season. There he walks with Formula One Dr. Sid Watkins, a highly respected neurosurgeon from London who heads up the safety commission, and I wonder what they're talking about.
You can tell by Martin's, I've been a teammate of Martin's for many, many years at Jaguar, and by his demeanor, the way he had his hands behind his back and he was talking to the doctor, he was trying to convince him that he's in good shape to race. That's what he was doing.
And listen to the applause he gets in the car.
This is great. Unfortunately, he's going to get a new spare car, but he's not got enough time to change his shorts, though. So it's going to be, he's a very lucky guy. Look at all that public. Wow. Go, Martin, get in your car, and let's see you have a great race.
This is also a new Formula One procedure. After you have an accident, to prove you're fit, you have to do a quarter mile up and down the pit lane.
Yeah, I can always laugh and joke about an accident when it has such a happy ending as this one did, but he is very lucky with all those pieces that were flying around. It is so easy for something to land in the wrong place, but I think the drivers are a lot more protected with these new rules than they were in the past.
Well, there's Eddie Irvine, who out-qualified Michael Schumacher for this race, and Schumacher handled it so well. When asked about it by the press, Schumacher said, well, I'm sure it'll be good for Eddie's motivation to start ahead of me.
Schumacher, I think Schumacher is an unbelievable racing driver, extremely talented, and he has the determination of a German. I mean, he really goes about his job in a tremendously well-organized manner. But when you're up on the top of the tree like he is, everybody's shooting at you. And I guarantee you, when Eddie Irvine goes to bed at night, he's thinking about how he's going to beat Schumacher. And if somebody is wishing and will put as much effort or a little bit more effort than he will beat him. Nobody is unbeatable, and Schumacher knows that. And in this team, I think the opportunity will be equal. I don't think the opportunity was equal at the Benetton team.
There is Rubens Barrichello, Eddie Irvine's former teammate. Eddie had an interesting comment, which dovetails nicely with what you were saying, Eddie. Irvine said, at the end of last year, Barrichello was being beaten up so much in the press that there really wasn't much point in me beating him anymore. It wasn't going to do any good for my career to finish ahead of Barrichello. He wanted to move on to the greater challenge of racing with and against the world champion. Now, while we have a moment, let's talk a little bit about the technical changes for the cars this year. Increased head protection. We've just seen graphic evidence of what that can mean to a driver in a crash. The exhaust, they are now banned from using expansive exhaust ports to help control power. Cranks and cams must be made of steel, no exotic carbon fiber. Fuel vents must be closed when the car is inverted, so no fuel can leak out. The clutch must be able to be disengaged when the car is stopped on the racetrack, and the steering wheel must be left in place. A couple of drivers have already been nicked in the wallet for that this weekend. Front wing end plates have been thickened to help prevent tires going down when the wing gets caught on a neighboring car's tire. The rear winglets must be forward of a box 40 centimeters, about 18 inches, beginning at the rear axle. And the engineers and designers in Formula One have have established elaborate measures to get around that rule. And there will be no exotic composites in the blocks or the heads of these engines. Any metal is okay, but no carbon fiber or plastic. Spare cars, Johnny Herbert is out of the race because Heinz-Harald Frentzen will take the spare car. Martin Brundle is in the spare car, and we are told that that car was set up for Rubens Barrichello. So as a result, Martin might be a little bit uncomfortable in it. There is Mika Hakkinen, who knows what it means to come out of a crash and return to Formula One.
That is one tough guy there. That is one very determined human being. Anybody to have that sort of a crash, he owes his life to a variety of things. A very good helmet and a very safe car and great doctors. But to come back and to drive as competitively as he has done is really a tremendous accomplishment.
He is being engineered this year by David Brown, who worked for the Williams team for a decade, engineering the likes of Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna, and Nigel Mansell. And now he is Hakkinen's man. Here comes Martin Brundle, back out in the spare Jordan with new livery this year. Cigarette sponsor Benson & Hedges is behind the team, so the cars are golden. And it appears he will start from the pit lane. We are 5 minutes from the next formation lap, our second attempt to start the opening race of the Formula One World Championship for 1996. We'll be right back down under. Back live at Melbourne, Australia. Bob Varsha and Eddie Cheever, glad to have you with us for the opening round of the Formula One World Championship. We are under a red flag awaiting the second formation lap as you look at Damon Hill sitting in his Williams Renault.
Damon was very, very lucky there. He got away with it. He had a very bad start, got passed by a whole bunch of cars, almost spun, and the accident actually worked into his favor now. Now he's sitting down thinking, where did I make my mistake? How can I make a better start? He might actually be on the part of the circuit that there's a lot more dust, and that could have been his problem.
Some 150,000 people expected for this opening round of the World Championship. Here's a look at what it cost them to get in. The best four-day grandstand, $340 US, may sound like a lot, but by Formula One standards, that's pretty good value. Best four-day general admission to walk about, as they say, $90. If you just want to come today, $50. And the big attraction off the racetrack, I'm told, is a brand new portable McDonald's restaurant that seats 160 people, cost over $500,000.
And the hamburgers are same as they are here.
That's right. I wonder what a Big Mac is going for under the Golden Arches there in Melbourne today.
I actually had a Big Mac once in Russia that tasted exactly like one that I'd had in Phoenix.
In a moment, they will clear the grid, and we will take our second attempt at a formation lap. Here's a look at the most Grand Prix wins among today's drivers. Schumacher, Hill, Berger. In fact, taking Jean Alesi and putting him in that group, there are only 4 drivers in the field who have ever won a Formula One race before. Schumacher, of course, working his way up the all-time list. He is presently 9th. Damon Hill, of course, just 1 away from his late father, Graham Hill, a 2-time world champion. If he can win today's race, he will even the family score. And Gerhard Berger, well, it would be difficult, I would think, for Gerhard to pick up a race victory today. He has had an absolutely abysmal time coming to grips with the Benetton, both the old and the new.
Qualifying is one thing and racing is another. The configuration they put the cars in for the race could be different than what they have done in qualifying. There's very long straightaways here, so they might have made some wing adjustments. Tire wear. None of these cars have actually done the whole race distance on this track. The car that is the best balance will be the one that wins the race if they can stay out of trouble. So I wouldn't count Berger out completely. There are drivers here today that could surprise everybody. I mean, the new Ferrari's done so few miles, and it's done quite a good job. I mean, being in the second row is a big achievement. So it is possible the Ferrari could come alive, and the Williams is one heck of a team, and they've done very, very well for the last 2 or 3 years. So there could be a lot of surprises today.
Once again, the engines fire, revving to as much as 18,000 RPM, a mechanical marvel. And there are 20 of them. Well, make that 18 of them now on the grid. We'll be right back. Live at Melbourne, Australia, the field is making its way around this 3¼ mile combination temporary and permanent road circuits as we prepare for the second attempt to start the first Formula One race of 1996 in Australia. We want to remind you, coming up Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, RPM Tonight, hosted by John Kernan from the heart of stock car country, Charlotte, North Carolina. RPM Tonight is fast. It covers everything that rolls in motorsports. 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, RPM Tonight, here on The Deuce. Beautiful look at the skyline of Melbourne, a city of about 3 million people. a million of whom we understand are descended from Greek and Italian ancestry, which makes it one of the world's great restaurant cities as well. Being the southern hemisphere, we are getting into the fall, but it has been quite warm. Temperature pushing 80 degrees as we prepare for this race. There's a great view looking out to the south. You see the layout of the city and where Albert Park is placed. Named for Prince Albert, German-born Prince Consort to Queen Victoria of England in the late 1800s. That is Albert Lake in the middle, about 3 feet deep. During qualifying, there were several boats parked out there with their propellers removed because the lake is so shallow that they would be beached if they had their props.
Now we have to remember that these gearboxes have already gone through one grueling start. I know that they are built to do many more than just one, but they've gone through a process that they only should be doing once every start, so once every race. So there might be a few mechanical problems here, and the drivers that have made mistakes on their first start are going to be thinking about how not to do that. So this could be a very interesting second start. I would keep my eye on Schumacher. Schumacher is very good at taking advantage of other people's errors, and he has the unique ability of getting inside of Damon Hill's head. So I'm sure Damon, after that first start and the fact that his teammate got such an excellent start on them, will be paying a lot of attention, not just on one front, but on two.
Now the field comes set once again. We did not notice the second McLaren of David Coulthard out there. Mika Hakkinen was involved in that crash, and the spare was set up for him as the team's #1 driver. So it would appear that David Coulthard does not have a McLaren Mercedes to race here today. Did you see him pull in, Eddie?
I think he might be there.
And it might have been one of the
so
arrows.
Difficult to see.
Martin Brundle will start from the pit lane. Coulthard is in the pit lane behind Martin Brundle. So they will take off information after the rest of the field. Here we go again.
It's gonna be close. It's gonna be close.
Lazy diving down underneath Michael Schumacher. Oh, lots of tire smoke at the first corner. Once again, Villeneuve and Hill. And now the Ferraris are back into third and fourth. This was the scene of the accident on the previous lap.
I think everybody learned their lesson.
Here comes Martin Brundle, followed by David Coulthard. Villeneuve opening a few car lengths worth of lead.
Now Villeneuve has an advantage here because he has an open track ahead of him, and he's probably looked a few times in his mirrors, and he knows that Hill is not that close to bother him. So all he has to do is just drive as quickly and as smoothly as he can and let everybody else fight. If he can get enough of a break here, then Hill will have to worry about Schumacher, and Schumacher's got to worry about the guy behind him, and he can just go along his pace.
Welcome sound of Formula One engines. Once again, in 1996, we are underway. This is the golf course corner. If you were with us for our qualifying show, we told you that the corners had not been named. Just a few hours ago, a list of temporary names was issued, perhaps appropriate for a temporary circuit.
Schumacher is all over Irvin.
The track is very slippery, very little tire wear. Soft B-compound Goodyears on everyone's cars. We do not expect pit stops for necessary tire changes, so it's purely down to how much fuel you have on board that will determine when and how often you stop.
And every one of these cars uses their tires in a different manner. The cars that have been the most testing will be the ones that are the most docile on the tires because they know how to set up the car to make them work. The longer you can run on a set of tires and the least you use your tires, the better off, obviously, you're going to be. That was one of Alain Prost and Niki Lauda's greatest secrets, is they did not use the tires at all.
Speaking of testing, there are the two Ferraris, and they have had virtually none. The new chassis, known as the F310, 3 for 3 liters of displacement, 10 for 10 cylinders, the first 10-cylinder powered Ferrari in history. But they have had very, very little time to shake them down.
There's a Benetton is catching up to the group. Martin is continuing to have a very difficult weekend. He's going to go back from Australia kind of wishing they'd never left England.
Oh my, he has spun and apparently stalled. He will be pushed off. Well, we mentioned the car was set up for Barrichello, which made it very difficult, I'm sure, for Martin, given the height differential between the two drivers. Now here is Brundle, and this might have been the sort of his problem.
Yes, he was trying to pass a car. It's so difficult on these brand new circuits. When you get offline, it's very, very slippery. There's no rubber down, so you can think you have the speed to pass somebody. When you go to get on the brakes, all 4 brakes lock up and you just can't stop. It's like being on ice.
Michael Schumacher has reestablished team orders. He now has passed Eddie Irvine for 3rd place. You see the number 1 on the Ferrari. Ferrari hasn't earned that number 1 since Jody Scheckter back in 1979. But Michael Schumacher has brought it to them, as Alain Prost did before Schumacher. There's the pass.
Very clean pass. Obviously, Irvine knew he was coming, gave him enough room. Now they can work almost in tandem and see if they can pick up the 2 cars that are ahead of him. In fact, Schumacher has already broken away a little bit from Eddie Irvine. And Villeneuve, although he's holding a very fast pace, has not managed to break away from the group. This is where Hill should come into his own because he's done so many miles with Williams and he's done so much testing. Now this is where a driver of his experience comes into his own because he knows that he can just keep lapping lap on lap on lap without making mistakes.
That is Jean Alesi and the new paint job on the Benetton. He was pressuring Eddie Irvine briefly, but now Irvine draws away once again. Ferrari V10 against Renault V10. Villeneuve has set fastest lap, but there's a very long way to go. 58 laps. We have restarted for the full 58 lap distance, roughly 190 miles, and it will be hard work on a warm day here in Melbourne with about 50% humidity.
And that's a lot. That is a lot, especially for the first race of the year, because everybody's still not used to what they're doing. So everybody to now, up to this point, everybody's still feeling their way around, and it is they're trying to see how the car is going to work. And being a brand new circuit, every lap they do, especially with 20 cars on the track is changing consistently. You're getting more and more grip, and it's going to be really interesting to see who has done the best job at setting his car up, not for the beginning of the race, but towards the middle and the end. And nobody has any experience on the circuit, so I'd say Villeneuve, if there was one race where he can start on equal footing with everybody else, it has to be this one.
6 points on this racetrack where the drivers reach speeds in excess of 170 miles an hour. They hit about 175 at the start-finish line. In fact, Damon Hill was the first to do it. 3 laps complete. Jacques Villeneuve taking up right where he left off in Indy cars, leading away here. Only 2 drivers in the history of Formula One, going back over 4.5 decades, have ever won their first race. Welcome back live to Melbourne, Australia, and the $42 million temporary circuit known as Albert Park. Michael Schumacher, the 2-time defending world champion in his Ferrari debut, has just set fastest lap.
This top trio have pulled away from the rest of the field just enough to make them kind of the cars you have to focus on now. Schumacher is looking incredibly precise and very comfortable in his car. I would say of these 3 cars, he's probably the one that is in the best position now because he can see the 2 cars ahead of them. It's a brand new car for him, and he's just starting to feel his way into the race. And he even qualified his spare car, which probably is one of the reasons why Eddie Irvine was ahead of him. But he is definitely picking up the pace, and we're going to see who's reliable and who's consistent. Now it comes down to those 2 things: consistency and reliability. And Schumacher has all of those qualities.
Had a look at the running order there. Giancarlo Fisichella, the former Italian Formula 3 champion, has made his way up to 13th from the 16th starting spot. Damon Hill, a quick look in the mirrors, and what does he see? His arch rival over the last 3 seasons, that man Schumacher.
His worst nightmare is right back. He's right back, and this time he just has a red car instead of a green one.
On the unofficial list of corners, this corner, the site of Martin Brundle's accident, is known as the Sports Center corner. If you look closely, you might see Dan Patrick and Keith Oberman with their feet up. Oh, spin and contact. That's one of the footwork cars. That is Ricardo Rosset, the Brazilian rookie. It looked like a pretty hard smack, too. I wonder if he hasn't knocked the camber out of those rear wheels.
Well, he'll find out pretty soon. That's one of the hardest things to do, is when you hit something and you have to get back to speed quickly. So yes, this circuit is playing a lot of tricks on a lot of people because they keep thinking they're going to have a lot of grip when they go to pass somebody, but they get offline and there's a lot of dust and they inevitably slide past. If you go back to the first 3 cars, and we'll probably be seeing them again in a second, Schumacher is picking up a lot of time under braking. Not so fast in the straightaway, but he's really pretty quick under braking.
Let's take another look at that. Rosset on the left. That's Pedro Lamy and the Minardi on the right.
He was almost by. He was almost by, but he just lost a little bit of momentum, and he gave the other car an opportunity to come back and take his own line. There really wasn't enough room there for two cars, but there isn't that much grip when you get offline. It's very difficult to stop these cars if you're not on a grippy part of the circuit. It's almost like driving over a damp track, so it's going to be very difficult to pass.
There you see the drivers who preceded Jacques Villeneuve in taking pole in their first ever Grand Prix. Of course, Giuseppe Farina of Italy in the first ever Formula One Grand Prix in Great Britain in 1950. Then Mario Andretti in the Lotus at Watkins Glen in 1968 at the U.S. Grand Prix. Finally, Carlos Reutemann in a Brabham, most recently at the Grand Prix of Argentina in 1972. And yesterday, it was Jacques Villeneuve. Of the 22 drivers entered in this race, they come from 13 countries. Once upon a time, there were about 8 Italian drivers in Formula One. Now, there are 2.
This is a pretty strange scene to be watching. You have 2 racing drivers with a lot of wins under their belt chasing a brand new racing driver who has come from a series that everybody kind of snickered at in Formula One, which was the IndyCar series, leading the race and doing an incredible job. It's as if he's been doing this for all of his life. To date, to what we've seen so far, he's driven impeccably. He's had 2 excellent starts. He hasn't put a wheel wrong to now, and they really haven't been fast enough even to get close to them to try to pass him. So it's quite an achievement.
A great shot from the roll hoop of Jean Alesi's Benetton Renault.
He and Eddie Irvine are having quite a tussle.
You can see how flat the racetrack is. Very difficult to remember all the corners. There's the pit entrance on the right. Onto the start-finish straightaway, up to 175 or so. And flicking down through those steering wheel mounted shift levers.
The beauty of those shift levers is that it allows you to just concentrate on driving. When I was driving Grand Prix cars, one of the hardest things to do was to learn to use the gearbox to your advantage. Sometimes you would go down from 6th gear to 2nd gear without going through the whole gate, and you had to learn how to do that because it was very easy to over-rev the engines. All they have to do now is just flick a button, flick a button. I think it's great technology because in essence, all you should be thinking about is driving.
Flashing down the shady lanes. Jean Alesi, in contrast to his teammate Gerhard Berger, has had a fairly comfortable time adapting to the Benetton.
Another point that we have to make is that Villeneuve and Damon Hill have a different pedal configuration in their car. Hill has got the normal 3 pedals, the throttle, the brake, and the clutch. But Villeneuve, having come from IndyCar racing, left foot brakes a lot, and he gave him the option of just having 2 pedals in the car, and he has taken that option. And that is a small subtlety in the driving, which could make a big difference throughout the season.
You see the running order. Fisichella has now dropped back, passed up by Ukio Katayama, who was very uncomfortable in his new generation Tyrrell. Believe it or not, a driver that was too small for the cockpit of a Formula One car. It hasn't been that way very often in Formula One. Michael Schumacher still runs 3rd behind Jacques Villeneuve and Damon Hill, the Williams teammates. And we'll be back live to Melbourne in a moment. Back live in Melbourne, Australia, there is Jean Alesi shedding parts from his Benetton. Just seconds ago, he had a big spin, and evidently he hit something as well. Left side pod absolutely stove in.
That is a racing car that is going to, trying to pass a Ferrari. That same spot again. That spot has caught 3 cars out. There was no way he was going to get by him. It would have been there was just not enough room there to get by him. They were too close. He did not have a big enough advantage. That's a pity. He was having a very good race. I wonder if the Ferrari has as much damage as he does. Here we can see he looks down the inside, but he's just not far enough, and he starts to correct and hopes to make it over the curb, and curbs just don't have the same amount of grip that asphalt does.
Which brings up another interesting point about those high cockpit sides to protect the drivers' heads. Several of the drivers have complained that they prevent them from seeing their mirrors very clearly, and you can't see when another driver is coming alongside.
Now, if this car can still run quickly with all those bits falling off, the aerodynamicists have made a mistake. No, he's coming in the pits. I don't really think that affects the peripheral vision that much looking at it, because they seem to have enough view, but I don't think you can put that accident down to a lack of vision. They were obviously racing very hard, and one driver thought there was room where another thought there wasn't. So that's racing. That happens.
As Jackie Ickx once said after punting Jackie Stewart out of a race, racing is passing. John Alesi with his eyes on the dashboard.
He stopped. That's it. Dead. That car's finished.
The crew is waving him off.
And it's very dangerous too, because he has that is where his radiators are. So any cooling that turns on that could drop onto his tires, you lose adhesion completely. That's one of the scariest things that can happen to you at a super speedway, is to be turning into a corner 240 miles an hour, and you have even a drop of any liquid on your tires, you lose adhesion completely.
Well, the car is pushed back. There you see the strips laid down on the pit lane to help the cars come to a stop. Meanwhile, from high overhead, the top three remain unchanged. Jacques Villeneuve, Damon Hill, and this man, Michael Schumacher.
Jacques Villeneuve is holding up very well to this pressure. It almost seems as if he's not really affected by it. He has his own pace and he's working away at it. That's the beauty of doing a lot of testing. I've never understood why teams don't go and test a lot more than they normally would. I mean, it's like a racing driver is an athlete. I cannot imagine a tennis player not going out and practicing and just turning up for Wimbledon and expecting to play well. He has done the job that he's done up to date because he has spent a lot of time in the car, and he's comfortable. He knows what he's doing. Nothing he's doing now is new to him.
There you see the running order with 11 laps complete. Villeneuve has come a long way since I first met him, driving in the Toyota Atlantic Series back in 1993. Then his English wasn't very good. He was kind of a rough character in a lot of ways, but now he is an absolute wordsmith. He was asked by the press whether or not he found himself often driving on the limit during practice, and he said, well, a driver always thinks he's on the limit until you found out that you weren't. So far, I believe I am, so hopefully that means I'm not.
That's almost a poem.
Absolutely.
A Canadian poem.
I thought it was brilliant. And look at the gap the top three have opened over the rest of the field. Eddie Irvine continues in fourth place, and still no word about any possible damage to his Ferrari after colliding with Alesi. Mika Hakkinen now runs fifth, and Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan has moved up to the sixth and final points-paying position. The top six earn points in 10, 6, 4, 3, 2, and 1 point increments.
2 years after his Jack's father had died, there were a lot of Formula One drivers that were taking a ski trip in Sestriere, and Jacques and his sister came up with her mother, and we spent a lot of time when he was a child at the ski resort. And one of the things they had a racetrack where you could drive a car onto this snow and ice, and he wasn't big enough to touch the pedals, so he was sitting in my lap. He was doing the steering, I was doing the throttle. And after about 2 laps, all he kept telling me was, quicker, quicker, press more on the throttle. I should have taken him out and given him a beating right then and there, because this guy has turned into an incredibly good, a good racing driver, and it's amazing. I'm astonished that he's doing as well as he is today. I really am truly astonished, because believe me, Hill is trying to reel him in. Hill wants to get close to him because he has Schumacher all over him, so he wants to be able to give pressure to his teammate, and he just hasn't quite been able to do it.
Of course, Jacques Villeneuve's father, the late Gilles Villeneuve, died in a practice crash at Zolder in Belgium in May of 1982. One of the most perhaps impetuous Formula One drivers of all time, famed for wanting to be the fastest man in every session, tearing the wheels off the car, spectacular crashes, won a half dozen Formula One races, but died well before his time in that tragic crash. Jacques Villeneuve, although he seems to have all of his father's speed, seems to have a very different approach to his racing. He was asked about his qualifying performance. He said, I always wait until the last lap or two to go for it. That way, if I spin off or destroy the car, at least I will have qualified for the race. That doesn't sound like what Gilles Villeneuve would have said.
Very mature. Very, very mature. Very mature attitude, especially with this new qualifying rules they have now. You have to get everything done on Saturday. He's a very mature racing driver, and he's very fit, and you can tell his driving is showing it.
Now this is the battle for 5, 6, 7, and 8. Hakkinen, Barrichello, Berger, and Salo. Notice the livery distinctions between the Benetton and the Tyrrell. There are basically none.
I'm so happy for the Tyrrell team to see that they're back with a competitive car. It's always interesting when they make rule changes. Teams that have had a hard time the previous year, if they get their homework right, they can really move up the grid. And that really is the beauty of Formula One, because technology is rampant here. They can do just about what they want. So this combination of the Tyrrell and the Yamaha engine, the Salo, is doing very, very well. They're running right behind the car or the team that won the World Championship last year. And Berger is definitely not a slouch, so it says a lot for how well they prepared themselves.
From high overhead, Mika Hakkinen leading Rubens Barrichello.
Obviously, Irvin's car was not hurt in that accident, or not hurt badly, because he's still on the track. And Ferrari are the first 4 positions are exactly as they were in qualifying, and nothing really has changed much.
You see behind the battle you're watching, those 4 cars. Heinz-Harald Frentzen runs in 9th, Jos Verstappen in 10th in the footwork, followed by Olivier Panis, Yukio Katayama, Giancarlo Fisichella, Pedro Diniz, David Coulthard, Ricardo Rosset, Pedro Lamy now running a lap down and may be in trouble. Remember, he was clobbered by Rosset. And Jean Alesi, of course, is out of the race. Joining Martin Brundle, Johnny Herbert on the sidelines. Montermini and Badua never started the race. Plenty of racing still to come, and we will be back live to the streets of Melbourne in just a moment. Welcome back to Melbourne, Knights. There is Jacques Villeneuve, who has led from pole through 14 laps of 58 scheduled in this race, chased by his Williams-Renault teammate right there, Damon Hill, hoping to tie his late father Graham Hill's tally of 14 Grand Prix victories here in the opening race of the 1996 season, being chased by the Ferrari of 2-time defending world champion Michael Schumacher of Germany. You want to see the NCAA basketball pairings first? You'll get them on ESPN tomorrow at 6:27 p.m. Eastern Time. Tune in for the men's tournament selection special, hosted by Chris Fowler, joined by Dick Vitale and Digger Phelps. Then at 7:30 p.m., State Farm presents the NCAA women's tournament selection special, a complete 64-team analysis and profile. The men and women both on ESPN, home of the 1996 NCAA Women's Final Four. Bob Varsha and Eddie Cheever with you. Jacques Villeneuve continues his astonishing mastery of Formula One in his debut race. He put the car on pole after an hour-long struggle with the 2 men who are chasing him right now, Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. The entire field in this race has 1,032 Grands Prix worth of experience. Jacques Villeneuve has zip, and yet he is on pole and leading with a very measured pace.
He's got 16 laps of experience. That's a lot, Bob. 16 laps. And he has 2 of the top drivers of their era that are behind them, and they really are not making any indentation whatsoever to him. I mean, he's just happily going along his way. His lines haven't changed. I haven't seen him lock up one brake yet. It'll be interesting to see how he comes when the back markers turn into view. This is a great view, isn't it? Square steering wheels now. That just goes to show you there isn't that much room in these things. They have to make sure everything just fits as small as they can.
I remember your steering wheel had a big chunk carved out of it to make room for your knees.
Yeah.
First pit stop. This is Mika Salo. Tyrrell team lost their Finnish sponsorship from the telecommunications giant Nokia, but they are soldiering on. Over a quarter of a century in Grand Prix racing. Oh, problem for Jackie Oliver's Arrows team. That's one of the footwork cars. Jos Verstappen, the young Dutch sensation, who tested first with what was then called the footwork team years ago, was then snapped up by Flavio Briatore for his Benetton team, but never got to race much. And now he has a seat with Jackie Oliver's team.
This could mean that they're going to start having tire changes now, because when one car starts, you have to think probably within the next window of 10, 15 laps, the cars are going to start coming in. It is also a question of strategy, so they might have worked out something different. The interesting thing about that Tyrrell is that the engineers have said that it has been designed around second gear corners, because in their calculations there are more second gear corners on the Grand Prix circuits than anything else. I've never actually heard somebody developing a car around a certain type of corner, but obviously their calculations are making sense.
Now, I would imagine at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher are going to be watching what Jacques Villeneuve does. If he pits, they have to consider pitting right away.
It depends a lot, A, on what the strategy of the team is, but also B, which is more important, how the driver feels he's going. If he feels that he can stretch out those tires as long as he can, he will, because it gives him more opportunity. It's a lot better to go into the end of the race with a fresher set of tires than go into the end of the race with the tires that have done 30, 40 laps on them. And again, I go back to what I had learned from people like Prost, is that the least amount that you use your tires, the better off you're going to be, because that is one thing that is not a variable between all the cars. So the driver who uses his tires less will always have a car that handles better.
You saw the race summary. Mika Salo pitted from 8th position. That position will now go to Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Mika Salo is back out, running in 11th place right now. Last year, part of Michael Schumacher's mastery of the series was his uncanny ability to complete very quick laps. Number 1 before he came in, and number 2 as soon as he came out.
It's all time. It makes no difference. I mean, it's once the green light, or I don't know what they call it now when they start the race, but once the race starts to when the race ends, the clock is running. So if you are slow, if you're very fast in the circuit when you should be running, but you come into the pits and you're very slow and you lose 2 or 3 seconds, those are 2 or 3 seconds that you have to make up. And he has an uncanny ability to turn the wick up quickly whenever he needs it. Irvine said that yesterday to the press, that he doesn't understand how Schumacher can go out on a second lap and be 2 seconds lap quicker than he is. So that is definitely a talent, because it's hard to go fast when the car isn't all warmed up, because it's very nervous and very jittery.
In fact, the drivers say that the abrasion, the tire traction, is so low on this racetrack that it takes about 5 laps to get your tires up to operating temperatures. And obviously that's the 5 laps where you want to maximize any advantage you might have over your opponents who might be pitting. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the drivers who get in and get out and have to make up time in a hurry.
Villeneuve is actually pulling away, not much, by about probably half a car length in certain areas. All the corners that go onto the long straightaways, which are the quickest and the most important, are the areas where his car is handling particularly well. He seems to be taking his time and being very careful when he's going around all these very little tight areas, where if you look at Schumacher, he is on the ragged edge. His car is bouncing around, and if you look at his hands, he's very twitchy. He's a driver who manages to carry an unbelievable amount of speed into the corners. And he does it, I think, mostly just on reactions. These Formula One cars have to be driven on reactions, whereas an Indy car, you have to kind of anticipate what it's going to do, because you're going much higher speeds.
Gerhard Bergeron, coming into the Benetton team, said the car was so critical, so difficult for him to drive on the limit. But that is the kind of car that Michael Schumacher likes. Very, very stiff, no induced roll whatsoever.
Go-kart. He started from go-karts, and he's done a lot of miles in go-karts, so the feeling he has had. I heard even now he trains at go-karts. When he's at home in Germany, he goes out in his go-kart. Here you have a man who's earning $45 million a year, who goes out and takes his job so seriously, he goes out and trains in a go-kart. All of the drivers of the future, every era has a racing driver who is the best, and all the other drivers try to emulate him. This guy is an athlete. He spends all of his time preparing for what he is doing. And I heard that he's awesome on a bicycle, he's awesome in a gym, he's a very fast runner, he's a great go-kart racer. So this is somebody who just thinks about nothing else except being the best racing driver he can. And if they want to beat him, there's somebody is going to have to do a little bit more than he does to be able to beat him.
In fact, as Michael Schumacher was growing up, his father managed a go-kart circuit. And as you say, Eddie, he goes back to that circuit and races, works on his own karts, builds his own karts. His hometown of Kerpen in Germany. He has a new residence now in Switzerland. Michael Schumacher had to leave Monaco because he ran afoul of laws that required a certain minimum stay.
Schumacher's in the pits.
Claim residency. Schumacher brings the car in. The first Ferrari stop. Now Schumacher is used to lightning fast stops,
look
sliding all over the pit lane.
Now there's a speed limit here now, just like there is in Indy cars.
75 miles an hour during the race. Ferrari not known for its lightning pit stops. Let's see how they do.
Listen to how calm he is. He's ready. He's going through a procedure now. He has a procedure. He knows he has to keep the revs at a certain amount. Perfect. Impeccable.
Long stop. I imagine a lot of fuel went in. You saw them waiting on the fuel hose to be removed. So Michael Schumacher might be planning a one-stop race. Now he's going to want to go as fast as he possibly can to build up a margin over the Williams cars when they pit.
Exactly. The clock is ticking. He knows that whatever time he can pick up, even if it's half a second, at the speed they're going, half a second is probably 300 yards. So half a second is half a second, and he knows that he has to pick up as much time as he can because later in the race it is going to pay back.
Where are the Williams teammates?
They're right.
Damon Hill getting very wild.
It's getting wild, but I think now that he has Schumacher off his tail, he can concentrate on Villeneuve. In fact, he's picked up on him. So obviously Schumacher was having an effect on how Hill was driving, or maybe his car is turning better into the circuit now than it was before. But now everybody's getting a little bit loose on the tires. Tire wear is starting to get kind of high. So we'll be seeing which one of these two guys will come in first. This will be a team procedure. The team, I think, when two cars are running this quickly, will decide who is going to come in, because they definitely don't want both drivers in the pits at once.
Absolutely. Williams' team has been working very hard on their pit stops over the winter. As you watch Damon Hill, they are lapping traffic. The next cars they will approach will be Ricardo Rosset and David Coulthard, right there in the red and white McLaren.
It's a very critical moment of the race for Villeneuve. Very, very critical moment of the race.
What a moment for David Coulthard as he gets passed by the car that was his 1 year ago.
Now Villeneuve has to time this. If he can time it, he has to time it where he can pass the car in a spot where only he can get by and Hill cannot. So he has to keep that margin between him and Hill as high as he can, and it's almost better if he lets Hill close up to him so that he can then accelerate past one car and get that distance, because if he can get that breakaway, that 100 yards, he'll again have a big advantage.
Great view from overhead. Villeneuve goes around Rosset in the footwork. A V8 engine from Brian Hart, who works miracles on very limited money for Jackie Oliver's team. In fact, Brian Hart wanted to bring out his new V10 for this season, but they simply couldn't find the money to fund it. And I'll bet it would have been a great engine. Passing the pit entrance one more time. No pit stop for the Williams teammates right now. Villeneuve and Hill out front. Not Gilles and Graham, Jacques and Damon. Back live on the streets of Melbourne, Australia. Bob Varsha and Eddie Cheever, glad to have you with us. Approaching, I should say, the midpoint of this 58-lap Grand Prix of Australia. Race leader Jacques Villeneuve flashes by the Sauber Ford of Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
Great move. That's exactly what he should have done. He passed him exactly in a spot, timed it perfect. Now he'll be able to break away a little bit from Hill and get a little bit of rest, because Hill was starting to close up on him. Look at the distance. That's just from timing his pass in the right manner. That might have been just chance, but it looked to me like he just did it exactly at the right moment and almost gave Hill enough room for him to try, because Hill had to actually back off. And in the previous pass in traffic, Hill just barely made it by.
Now Damon Hill closing up once again. Still waiting for the pit stop for the Williams team, but moments ago, Eddie Irvine brought the other Ferrari in, and it was a very quick stop.
They had to be, what was it, a 12-9?
12-9.
So these crews are very competitive, even amongst the team. One crew wants to beat the other one, so this is something they will know on Monday morning whether they did or not.
Once again, waiting for fuel out in a full second, quicker than Schumacher's stop.
That's a lot of distance on the racetrack.
If you can flash around with the ability of a Michael Schumacher. Still the Williams teammates past the pit entrance.
Damon Hill right now is the fastest car on the track. He seems to be coming into his second breath now.
You see that sign, Transurban. That's a construction company that is building a major new highway network in and around the Melbourne area called the CityLink. Keep in mind that your average street car is cranking at about 3,000 RPM. That is highway level engine speeds. A Formula One car, you have to get it up to 3,000 just to drop the clutch and get it started. They will rev up to 17,000 RPM or so. There's one of the Benettons. This is Gerhard Berger. Jean Alesi is already out of the race. Berger wasting no time coming in. this is something else that Schumacher excels at. One of his mechanics has written a book called Life in the Fast Lane, which coincidentally is also the title of Alain Prost's book about life in Formula One. And he said that one of Schumacher's strengths was that he was inch perfect on placing his car during pit stops.
9.1. 9.1. That is 3 seconds faster than Schumacher's pit stop.
Less fuel going in. Gerhard Berger may have started with more. He comes out right ahead of Ukio Katayama's Tyrrell.
Katayama has a unique problem that he's too small for his cockpit. I've always had exactly the opposite. I had to stop driving Formula One cars because they changed the regulations, and I couldn't. I'm 6 feet tall and I couldn't fit into them. I would have paid to have been too small for a race car. I think he better come up with a better excuse than that. That one, that's not going to pass in my book.
I sat in your car once, and the first feeling you get when you sit in a Formula One car is how tiny they are.
They have to fit you like a glove. You cannot be driving thinking about how uncomfortable you are, if your legs are going to sleep. You have to be driving and just thinking of nothing but that. The racing car has to be as comfortable as a couch, because if your concentration goes away and you start thinking about how uncomfortable you are, it is going to have an effect on your performance. And that's probably the reason why Mansell was not very successful in the McLaren when he went back to Formula One. He was, it makes your job such a misery having to drive something when you just don't fit.
Barrichello.
The fast time to beat is 9.1.
Little trouble getting that fuel hose off, and a little slow getting away, but 11.3, about average.
What the cars have now to make sure that you don't go over the speed limit exiting and entering the pits, you have a little button that you push, and it controls all the electronics of the engines are controlled so that you cannot overspeed it. The engine just won't. It's like a governor. It just won't allow you to go any faster.
Still no pit from the Williams team. The running order is Villeneuve and Hill. Michael Schumacher is third. Mika Hakkinen fourth. Eddie Irvine back out in fifth. Rubens Barrichello came in from sixth position. He is further back than that now. Gerhard Berger moves up to sixth with the stop by Barrichello.
This says volumes for how well the Williams have done their homework. Any car that can last longer than the other ones with tires is always going to have an advantage. So you have both of the Williams drivers here that have outrun all of their direct competition, and they are still out with the same set of tires, and they are still the fastest cars on the track. This is going to be a very, very hard team to beat. The one thing that Williams has always had over the years is consistency. Patrick Head has always been the chief engineer. They've had new people coming in and out, but the team has remained very solid.
There is David Coulthard's McLaren. It appears his day is done. We got a report from one of the corners that he was off and on the racetrack. At the top of the roll hoop, you saw the onboard camera and the unique new rear end fairings in Formula One now as the designers work. Here is Coulthard. Looks like he drove it off.
Yeah,
that's the pit entrance.
Yeah, well, he missed it by about 150 yards.
Keep in mind, that's David Coulthard, who also hit the pit wall at the Australian Grand Prix last fall, trying to get his Williams into the pit. He has not had a lot of luck with those highway exits. Remarkable that Villeneuve and Hill had so much fuel on board because they are going so far, and yet they were able to remain ahead of Schumacher. There you see the the pit stops for Berger, Irvine, Barrichello, Schumacher, and Salo. Keep in mind that is from pit in to pit out, and the length of stop determined by the amount of fuel that goes in.
Berger's is actually very competitive, isn't it? That's very, very. Now that is time. That's the same as a lap. That's exactly the same. That is distance on the racetrack that you are either going to gain or you're going to lose. And that I've always noticed that at places like Indianapolis 500, where if you have a bad pit stop, you can go into the pits very close to somebody, and you come out and you're 300 yards behind him, and you can't figure out where's all that time gone. And it's exactly the same. It's a very hard thing to get into a racing driver's head, that it makes no difference whether you're in the pits, you're leaving the pits, you're on the racetrack.
It is all time. Of course, last year the Benetton team was without peer when it came to precision pit stops.
Something strange is happening here. Villeneuve was losing to Hill, and in the last 4 laps he's picked up almost 400, probably 300 yards. and there haven't been any back markers. He seems to be pulling away a little bit from him.
There's Hill.
Now the cars are getting light on fuel, and I don't think both these drivers have set their cars up exactly the same way, so you could see some difference in how they're handling between the two cars.
Still no pit in for the Williams teammates. We'll take a timeout and return live to Melbourne with more of the Grand Prix of Australia. 29 laps of 58 now complete. We are at the halfway mark of the Grand Prix of Australia, round 1 of the Formula One World Driving Championship for 1996. I'm Bob Varsha along with Eddie Cheever. Jacques Villeneuve took the pole in a tense qualifying session. He has held it through 2 starts following a massive accident suffered by Martin Brundle in his Jordan, breaking the car in half. Brundle eventually got the spare car and dropped out, but Villeneuve has withstood the pressure of that man, Damon Hill, and of 2-time defending world champ Michael Schumacher, who runs in 3rd, but nowhere in sight. Still waiting for a Williams pit stop. Here's a program note. Say goodbye to hockey's most legendary arena, the Montreal Forum, as the Montreal Canadiens end their 68-year association with the great old building. They welcome the Dallas Stars, and you could see it Monday night, March 11th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific from the Forum here on The Deuce. It should be a great evening. We have a great race going here, and we could have history to be made once again. Only 2 drivers have ever won their first Formula One Grand Prix. As you look at the cars out of the race, Johnny Herbert virtually never got it started. His teammate and team leader, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, took over the spare car after activities in the opening laps. And Villeneuve has now pitted. Brundle saw Alizé out after a collision with Eddie Irvine's Ferrari. Let's watch the Williams team go to work in their first stop of 96.
You hear the engine of the rev limiter? He's trying to keep it right on the limit.
75 miles an hour.
They're having a problem taking a tire. No, it sets off.
Shouldn't need all that much fuel. Oh, there is a problem.
There's a
right
problem
rear.
Oh, this is terrible. Well, that's a very bad break. That's a very, very bad break. They had a problem. They had a problem taking that tire off, and then we kind of lost the camera view, and you couldn't see what happened. But the mechanic didn't seem to raise his hand that convinced. I mean, when you've finished your tire, you raise your hand, and that gives your crew chief the warning that you are all done. So I really hope everything was put on the way it should be here. Yeah, he's fine.
It cost him 5 or 6 seconds, and that is an eternity on the racetrack. Here comes Mika Hakkinen, the only remaining McLaren Mercedes.
That really was a disappointing pit stop for Villeneuve. He had run impeccably to that. That'll make the race more interesting, because if everything is normal and Hill keeps running at the speed that he has been running, he will be probably 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds ahead of Villeneuve 3 or 4 laps after he does his pit stop. That was a very slow pit stop for McLaren also, 13.5 seconds. And they didn't have that much fuel to put in because we're over half race distance.
You see one of the Ligets working on a very limited budget this year under director Tom Walkinshaw. Rubens Barrichello has been off and on. Comes the word from the corner workers at turn 12.
There's that corner again.
And that is the race leader, Damon Hill, coming up from behind. Talk about the McLaren team. They haven't had a victory since 1993 in the Australian Grand Prix back in Adelaide, when it was won by the late Ayrton Senna, and they have won no titles since 1991.
This could be a big break for Villeneuve. If Hill gets caught up in this traffic, he can pick up those 2 or 3 seconds that he had lost in the pits, because Hill's been behind these guys for almost 4 corners now, and that must have cost him at least a second.
It's Olivier Panis.
He's got by one of them. Now he's got by the other one.
There you see the gap from Hill to Villeneuve. Down through the gearbox, hard on the brakes. What an extraordinary machine a Formula One race car is.
It's built with one purpose in mind, to go here. He's coming in the pits. Hill is in the pits. So we should see how much Villeneuve lost probably after 2 or 3 laps. Hear the rev limiter? That is a lot easier to push that button to get up to 70 miles an hour than looking down at the revs and checking what speed you're at.
Keep in mind, Jacques Villeneuve is 38 seconds away and closing fast.
Oh, it's going to be a quick one, I think. No, again. That's unbelievable.
There you see Olivier Panis is away, and Damon Hill's clock is still running. Now he is away 18 and a half. Oh, my.
There was, the fuel was going, I mean, it was a question of the fuel going in slowly, and I can't understand why they're over half race. It took him so long. Yes, but Hill's tires are cold, or he's not up to speed, and Villeneuve has to get him now. He cannot wait. He has to get him now. He can't let him even go through 3 corners. That's what you call defensive driving. If you want to pass me, that's fine with me. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Villeneuve knew that his teammate had cold tires, a brand new set. He was warmed up. He knew what his tires were going to be like. He had his rhythm, but he knew that if he let him wait too long, he would have a problem.
Here's Michael Schumacher's stop.
This is an unprogrammed stop. There was no reason for him to be in here. Yeah, something is wrong.
He was losing ground.
He had done some laps in 38 seconds when Hill was doing him in 34.
Looks like they're reaching in some kind of front suspension problem.
That's one very mad German right now. Well, I think it might be something with the brakes, because that's where all the brake cylinders are.
Talking with his engineer.
No, they're sticking their hand inside the cockpit. Well, that kind of puts him out of the race.
Very long stop.
And the engine's heating now. This is not good. These engines are cooled by air, so when you stop in the pits like that, if you stay there for a minute and a half, the temperature can go up 20 degrees.
We're going to send him back out. Although at this point, unless something drastic happens to the Williams cars, he is racing purely for points.
But Eddie Irvine is way ahead of him. I mean, he'd have a very hard time catching up to him. 50 seconds is an eternity. And there's only 25 laps left. But I think the Ferrari have done an exceptional job, and they are extremely competitive. And Schumacher was right there. He was right there when everything was running well. I think this might be the beginning of a great. Oops, he's off into the pits. He had a brake problem. That's what the problem was. He had a brake problem.
So it appears that Michael Schumacher will score no points at all here today.
Yes, no brakes. Now, if you watch the tires, you'll see one of them lock up. See the left-hand side lock up? Yeah, he has no. What's happened is I think he's had a problem with the fluid in his brake system, and only 2 sides or 1 side of the discs are actually working, and that's not quite enough. When you need 4, 2 is not quite enough.
He's trying to stay out of the way.
He's
there
coming
goes
back
Eddie
in the pits.
Irvine
He's
going
done.
by. So a remarkable turn of events for the 2-time defending world champion. Ferrari was living a dream weekend thus far with virtually no test time on this car. In fact, they shipped it out to its first test. Whoa, Villeneuve and Hill, the Williams teammates, are going at each other once again. Frank Williams is not here this weekend. Of course, he is confined to a wheelchair, and he had recently sold his private jet. He has not taken delivery of his new one yet, and he cannot fly commercially this great a distance. Oh, and off the track is Villeneuve.
I can tell you one thing. If Hill has an accident with Schumacher, that is one thing. But if these 2 drivers run each other off and Eddie Irvine finishes first, Frank Williams is going to be a very unhappy team owner. These guys are going at it tooth and nail.
Oh,
something went wrong with Villeneuve's car, and he seemed to have lost some speed. Either this set of tires is not to his liking, or I have no idea. He lost it going into the corner. A great piece of driving to keep it going. Now all Villeneuve is thinking when he gets back on the road is, where is Hill? Where do I have to place my car? Because I have a long section coming up. Where do I have to place my car to make it as difficult as possible for him to pass me? and he made the right decision.
A lurid slide in the first corner that has collected a number of cars this year, and Michael Schumacher is tucked into the Ferrari garage.
Now Villeneuve's position right now mentally is very, very hard. He has gone from being the fastest car in the circuit to being pretty comfortable. He's gone off the track. He's managed to keep his teammate behind him, but he has to get his rhythm back. He has to forget about Hill, and he has to get his rhythm back. But he might have a problem with his car that he has to drive around it. He might be having to make some small changes to how he drives his line. And obviously he's not as comfortable as before. But you would expect a driver of the experience of Hill to get stronger towards the end of the race. And if there's one thing that a new driver has to learn in Formula One, is that the pace of the races are very long. Unlike an Indy car where you get yellows often, this is a constant race from the minute you start the race to the minute you end.
1980 world champion Alan Jones, who is of course Australian and who won his title with the Williams team, said Jacques Villeneuve's qualifying performance was one of the most phenomenal efforts he has ever seen in Formula One. And now it would appear that Villeneuve is getting a big dose of the reality of racing in the world's most popular form of motorsport. Villeneuve, Hill, and Irvine running up front. We'll be back to Melbourne in a moment. Back live in Melbourne, Australia, where Jacques Villeneuve is doing everything possible to keep his teammate Damon Hill behind him. I want to remind you about the next race on the globetrotting Formula One World Championship. It'll be the Grand Prix of Brazil, and it'll be coming your way live Sunday, March 31st, 10:50 a.m., 7:50 on the Pacific Coast. And we will begin with an on-the-grid special half hour before the start of the race.
Villeneuve did exactly the same thing he'd done before in traffic. He timed it just perfect, got around a car, and put Hill under a lot of pressure to try to make it around. These guys are dueling out, not just with racing cars, but they're dueling mentally right now. And the stronger of the two is the one that's going to finish ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about intra-team chemistry. Based on the kind of racing Villeneuve is giving Damon Hill right now, what's that like to do to their personal relationship within the team?
They're not there to be popular. They're not there to kiss and hug each other. They're there to win races. And Frank Williams has made it very clear, both privately and to the press, that they are free to race, and the fastest one that wins will be the #1 driver. Unlike the situation that Schumacher has at Ferrari, where he is the #1 driver and it's written into his contract, these two drivers have to obviously compete in a correct manner. They can't be running into each other. But what I've seen so far just limits on teammate correctness. But you have somebody here with Villeneuve who has every intention of winning the race. He has every intention of getting pole when he can, and he couldn't care less that Damon Hill is his teammate. He just sees it as a competitor, and it's his job to beat him. And I think Frank Williams has given them all the rope they need to do that.
Let's update the mechanical casualties. A gearbox has taken Rubens Barrichello out of the race. Rough start for Eddie Jordan's team this year. David Coulthard dropped out with throttle problems in the McLaren. And we have confirmation from the Ferrari garage. It was brake failure that sidelined Michael Schumacher. Way to go, Eddie. I'll have to come back and do this again.
I don't know. Villeneuve has gotten past that critical moment he had when he went off the track and he seemed to be having a hard time, and now he's back to his rhythm, although Hill seems to be just a little bit more confident than he was at the beginning of the race. Hill kind of has the upper hand now because Villeneuve is having to drive with Hill in his mirrors, and that's always a little bit uncomfortable because you've got to, every move you make, you have to make sure you're in a position to defend whatever place you want on the track.
There you see the gap from second place Damon Hill to third place Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari. As you can see, that gap is coming down, just a couple of tenths on that last lap. But Irvine is lapping in 1:34s, and there he is, while Villeneuve and Hill are battling one another and going slightly slower than that.
They're going a little bit slower because Villeneuve is having to drive in a semi, not really a defensive mode, but in a semi-defensive mode. When we get back to where we can see the two Williams driving, if you look at the line that Villeneuve is taking, he's taking very wide lines and using a lot of road. And if you look at Hill, who is right behind him, he's probably covering maybe a fifth less distance. He's using less road. And what he's doing is he is studying the lines that Villeneuve is taking, and he's trying to think, where is the best place for me to pass? Because he's not going to have many shots at it. And on a track like this, where it's slippery when you get offline, you have to make sure when it's time to pass, you do it. You can't be thinking about it, you have to do it. So he's preparing himself now for that. He already had 2 runs at him and failed in both of them.
See the gap stretching out just a little bit. Eddie Irvine with clear track in front of him. Right hand shifting up, left hand shifting down.
Look at his fingers. That's incredible, isn't it? Look at the rev counter in the middle of his steering wheel. You can see when it tells him that he's getting close to where he has to change gear. When he has all those lights lit up, it's time to press the button.
And those lights are built into the steering wheel.
They have it so that he doesn't actually have to look at anything. That is in his line of vision. So he can just, it's not really a peripheral vision, but it's a color code that his body and his mind just gets used to using. So changing gear becomes instinctive and is not something he has to program and look at a rev counter to change. Everything on these cars are made to make it as simple as you can. All you have to think about is your line and the speed.
Meanwhile, Gerhard Berger, running in 4th place, also has a piece of racetrack to call his own. It is Villeneuve and Hill, 18 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine, and another big gap to Gerhard Berger. We'll be right back. Melbourne, Australia, the opening round of the 16 in the 1996 Formula One World Driving Championship. The race leader is Jacques Villeneuve over Damon Hill and Eddie Irvine. Now we want to correct something I said earlier about our air times for the Grand Prix of Brazil. Let's get them straight. On Saturday, March 30th, 1 hour of qualifying. You'll see it at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Then on Sunday, March 31st, the race at 10:30, not 10:50, but 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Live coverage beginning with a half hour on the race grid, and then the second round of the World Championship from Sao Paulo. 6 cars remain on the lead lap. The points earners at this point: Jacques Villeneuve, Damon Hill, Eddie Irvine, Gerhard Berger, Mika Hakkinen, and Mika Salo. Then Olivier Panis leads the cars that are 1 lap down, including Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who has just pitted, Ukio Katayama, Ricardo Rosset, Pedro Diniz. They are all 1 lap down. Pedro Lamy now 6 laps down. I believe he is actually out of the race, although he is still being counted. And Giancarlo Fisichello's race appears to be done as well.
Berger's into the pits again.
We've noticed him being very nervous looking on the racetrack.
Yes, he doesn't look at all comfortable in that car. I think it's going to take a while for them to look at all that brake dust come out of the carbon fiber brakes. He doesn't look very comfortable in the car. I think they still are in the mode of setting the cars up with the past experience they have with Schumacher. And Schumacher has a very particular driving style that doesn't seem to fit Berger. It's almost closer to what Alesi drives than it is to Berger.
Berger pitted from 4th place.
There comes Hakkinen. What a tremendous weekend he has had.
So Berger managed to get into the pits and out again and still stay ahead of Mika Hakkinen, the McLaren Mercedes. Mercedes says this is a much improved engine, a totally new 3-liter engine. Last year's was a downsized, last year the Ilmor-built Mercedes was a totally new 3-liter engine. Most everyone else's were downsized 3.5-liter mills. But this Mercedes apparently makes a lot more power and is much more drivable, making power over a much wider band from 6,000 to 16,000 RPM.
I think you'll see a big jump forward in the team's performance now that Prost is back into the thinking mode of trying to make the cars run better. Prost was an incredible technician. He was very talented at making the car and the team work in the proper manner. The Williams might have to stop again for tires because 2 cars that are running fast, both Berger and Irvine, have come back in the pits, and it could be interesting to see if maybe the difference of the race will again be a pit stop between the 2 Williams drivers.
Eddie Irvine's second stop. He now carries the hopes of Ferrari. If he can somehow manage to win this race, he won't need an airplane. He can walk on water all the way back to Italy. Cars out of the race: Johnny Herbert, Martin Brundle, who had a savage crash at the first abortive attempt to start this race. Jean Alesi collided with Eddie Irvine. The Ferrari looks fine. The Benetton was not. Jos Verstappen pulled off in his footwork. David Coulthard, as we mentioned, throttle problems on the McLaren Mercedes. Rubens Barrichello, problems with the gearbox. And most recently, Michael Schumacher lost brakes on his Ferrari. See the 11 cars still shown in the race. Pedro Lamy is now out. Like that 12 cars. Pedro Lamy, we are told, is not officially out of the race, although he is dropping back at a furious rate.
When a car runs behind another, as long as Hill's been running behind Villeneuve, you have to be a little bit careful that your temperatures don't go up. If you're too close to him, it's possible that your engine could be running almost 10 to 15 degrees higher than Villeneuve is. I can't understand why the gap between Hill and Villeneuve keeps changing so much. Maybe Hill is actually working on trying to cool his car down, because he seems to get within striking distance, and then 2 or 3 laps later he backs off a little bit.
15 laps remaining. Will Villeneuve be balked here as he goes around the Minardi? Apparently not, and Damon Hill will get through cleanly as well. So the Williams teammates free to continue their intramural battle. We'll be back with more live from Australia. Back in Melbourne, Australia, about 300 miles to the southeast of the site of the season-ending Grand Prix of Australia, ending the 1995 season. We are in Melbourne now for the opening race of the 96 season. Jacques Villeneuve leads the race. As you see, only 2 drivers have ever won their first Grand Prix. Giuseppe Farina won the very first Grand Prix of the Formula One era. And Giancarlo Baghetti, who just passed away in late 1995, won his first Formula One effort. In fact, his only Formula One victory in the 1961 French Grand Prix. The start-finish straightaway.
Villeneuve just took off a visor, what do you call those rip-offs that you have that clean your visor up?
Tear-offs.
Tear-offs, yes. There's nothing more comfortable than when you're under pressure that you take one of those tear-offs off and you have a completely clear view. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Sloppy there for Villeneuve. His car looks pretty pristine. Behind him, Damon Hill's car is very dirty.
As I was saying, when you take those tear-offs off, there's nothing that can clear your mind more than having a clear view, because inevitably after you've been driving behind somebody, you have a bunch of rubber and oil on your helmet, and it makes for very difficult viewing.
It's already been an historic weekend for Jacques Villeneuve, one of only 4 drivers to take pole in his opening Grand Prix. But Villeneuve is in many ways the best prepared rookie in Grand Prix history. Has done over 5,500 miles of testing with the Williams team. Everyone in Formula One likens it to Michael Andretti's short visit to Formula One a few years ago, when he got very little testing for the McLaren team and suffered throughout the season as a result of it.
But Villeneuve went about it, I think, in a little bit different manner. He went to Europe, lived there. He wasn't flying back and forth, so he took advantage of the opportunity that was there.
Is that a puff of smoke from the back of that car, just noticed? We'll see. 5 cars now remain on the lead lap. The 6th car, Mika Hakkinen, has been passed. This racetrack was born in controversy. A number of protesters were arrested at one time or another during its development. Most recently, a very sinister set of letters was received by the Formula One teams from an anonymous person. Of course, cowards are usually anonymous, threatening physical harm against the drivers through the use of nails on the racetrack. But thus far this weekend, there has been virtually none of it. A few protesters were herded out of a grandstand. It turns out they had bought tickets for the race, and we are told they are now suing the race organizers for contravening their ducats. But I'm happy to say there has been very little public outcry, and that may be because this $42 million temporary racetrack has done a great deal to upgrade Albert Park. With new plantings, more trees were planted than were cut down to create the racetrack, and the buildings that were built will house amateur sports when the Formula One racers are gone. We'll be back. Back live on the streets of Melbourne, Australia, Jacques Villeneuve hopes to make history by winning his debut in the Formula One World Driving Championship. Program note, if you're looking for the latest in motorsports, join Kenny Mayne on RPM Today tomorrow from ESPN headquarters at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific on The Deuce. There you see the gap from 2nd place Damon Hill to 3rd place Eddie Irvine.
Villeneuve seems to have pulled away the last 2 or 3 laps, but he's been doing this for about the last 20, 25 laps. He pulls away, then Hill comes back again. Look how dirty Hill's car is compared to Villeneuve's. That you can't even tell they're teammates.
I don't think that's what Villeneuve was referring to in his comment at the top of our show, that Formula One is a little dirtier than Indy cars.
I don't quite think that he was referring to that, but he did his own little piece of dirty driving, keeping his teammate behind him. It wasn't dirty, it was just placing his car in the right place. The biggest problem that a racing driver has to face when you're driving behind somebody trying to pass them is when they start to weave and they are erratic in their movements. What Villeneuve did, he was not erratic, he just put his car, it was his choice to put his car in the position he did, and he made Hill take a decision which in the end did not prove the right one because Villeneuve was still ahead of him.
But this is something that Formula One has struggled with, particularly last year and the season before, with the collisions that have resulted between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher in close quarters. In fact, at one point, the Formula One officials decided they would impose passing rules, but Schumacher and Hill both came to them and said, no, that's not going to work.
That's ridiculous.
Cooler heads prevailed.
Yes, that is ridiculous. I think when you have officials that try to go a little bit past just their officiating, you're going to have a problem. You can't be ruling out how and where you're going to pass. What's next? Are they going to tell you what you're going to have for breakfast?
Villeneuve's car must be spitting oil.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
You see the car, the rear wing on Damon Hill's car, and he just pulled off a tear-off on this front straightaway.
I think Hill now is collecting himself, and he knows that he has a very finite number of laps that he has to pass Villeneuve in. He's studied him as much as he can. Now he's got to get close, and he has to make a decision on whether it's worthwhile to try to pass him, because it's not going to be that easy since the cars are that close. And nothing would be more humiliating for both of these drivers if they run into each other. I don't think Frank Williams and Patrick Head would take it very well if on the first Grand Prix their two drivers bumped into each other and Ferrari with a brand new car won the Grand Prix.
The Renault engines have been bulletproof over the years, but this newest iteration, the RS8 V10, has shown a little bit of reliability problems. They lost several in off-season testing. Jean Alesi with the Benetton team lost one in Friday practice, and it was very, very rare. Renault went for several seasons with Williams without losing an engine in a race. Here are the shoes that Jacques Villeneuve will be trying to fill. His father, Gilles Villeneuve, 67 starts in Grand Prix racing with 2 poles and 6 victories. The younger Villeneuve with 31 starts in Indy cars. He was Rookie of the Year in 1994, won the Indianapolis 500 and the PPG IndyCar World Series title with 5 victories last year, and he's already picked up his first pole in Grand Prix racing. He may get a win today.
Did you see how he checked in his mirrors? He's been checking in his mirrors in exactly the same spot on the circuit every lap. That shows me that he's very confident of where he's at. He's not looking all the time.
Also helps him gauge how far back Hill is based on where he is on the same part of the racetrack relative from one lap to the other. Less than 10 laps to go here in Australia. We could be watching history as the latest Villeneuve sensation emerges from Canada into Grand Prix racing. We'll be back. May be headed for yet another dramatic twist in the final laps of this Formula One Grand Prix of Australia. There are signs that Jacques Villeneuve is in trouble. There is smoke from the back of his car.
He has been smoking a lot the last 2 or 3 laps, and Hill was getting very, very close to him. But if he is actually losing oil or water, that could be bothering Hill, so where he can't get close enough, because every time he gets close, his visor gets all covered up. If you look at the back of the wing of Hill's car, it's almost black now with all the oil. You couldn't even tell these 2 cars are from the same team.
6 laps remaining. The 2 Williams cars unchallenged out front. Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari is well back, and it will be quite an achievement for Ferrari. If he can come home on the podium, it would equal his best ever Formula One performance, a 3rd place a year ago in Canada, where Jean Alesi brought the number 27 Ferrari, so closely associated with Jacques Villeneuve's late father Gilles, home for his first Formula One win.
If he is leaking oil, the quality of his oil is going to be extremely important right now. Traffic.
One of the Tyrrells.
I really appreciate that when a racing driver gets out of the way to let the two drivers get on with their duel.
That is Ukio Katayama.
Now, if you look at the back of Villeneuve's car under acceleration, there's just a light cloud that's following him. He is, see it right here? See it right there?
Well, at this point, he cannot afford to nurse it along.
These are going to be the longest 5 laps of his life.
Hill closes in.
Oh yeah, that's definitely oil. It has to be oil.
Hill, ooh, looks underneath.
Yeah, Villeneuve's in trouble. Villeneuve is definitely in trouble. He seems to be losing it at the end of, they're even telling him to slow down. So the telemetry in the pits, they know there's a problem with the temperatures when they tell him they had him to slow down. So they're telling him, you're just not going to make it. He's not in an easy position. Here we go, it's done. That's it. The team decided.
And so Jacques Villeneuve must give up his quest to join Farina and Baghetti as a Formula One winner in his debut. But based on what we've seen this weekend, he's got a few victories coming
Absolutely.
his way.
He should have had some of that Quaker State oil that I have in my Menard. That would have kept him going a long time.
Yeah, I had to do it. We're going to be running very close on time at the end of this live broadcast. We want to remind you, coming up next will be the Big West NCAA men's basketball semifinal, matching San Jose State and Cal Irvine from the Lawler Event Center in Reno, Nevada. So stand by for that. We'll get to it as quickly as we can as soon as this race comes to a conclusion. Damon Hill wound up his troubled 1995 season with a victory on the streets of Adelaide, Australia. He has just set up housekeeping in Dublin, Ireland. I think Damon Hill might consider buying some real estate in Australia because this country has certainly been kind to him.
Well, that is really a pity that Villeneuve had to back off like that. He drove perfectly. The one mistake that he made, he recovered from it in a hurry. The race obviously is not over yet, but Hill seems to be running at a perfect speed right now. And for the pits to have told him to slow down, their telemetry, they know everything that happens on these cars. Their telemetry has told him, if you keep pushing your engine at the way you're pushing it now, your temperatures are not working, you're probably losing a little bit of oil pressure, you will not make it. So the team made a decision, and he is a very wise racing driver at the beginning of his relationship with Williams to say, I acknowledge what you're saying, even although I am leading, I will slow down, you know better than I do.
The Renault teams carry about 4 tons worth of telemetry computers parked in the back of each garage, monitoring the heartbeat of each of their 4 engines in the race. And one of them apparently will power Damon Hill to victory here today. Stay with us. Back live in Australia, there is Jacques Villeneuve, who allowed his teammate Damon Hill to go by. He runs in second place, and the question now is, can he hold off this man, the third-placed Ferrari #2 of Eddie Irvine? It looks as though he has enough there, but Irvine is lapping at about 134 per lap, while Villeneuve is doing about 10 seconds a lap slower than that. But there are only about 2 laps remaining.
Villeneuve is just pacing himself to stay just ahead of the Ferrari. He doesn't have to beat him by much, but you know, he has a car now that's just limping along. His engine is just probably barely making it. He's been leaking oil for who knows how long.
Looks like Eddie Irvine's last lap was a little bit slower too, a 137, so he dropped off about 3 seconds in speed on that last lap.
But he's 40 seconds behind the second car, so I mean, he has a car that hasn't proved its reliability either, so the race kind of is set now. All you have to do is finish it out. There's only 2 laps remaining. To make a mistake with 2 laps remaining when you're 40 seconds behind the car in front of you is pretty silly. And drivers of this caliber do not make mistakes like that.
Well, Eddie Irvine, who out-qualified the world champion, his teammate Michael Schumacher, will now bring the only point-scoring Ferrari home, equaling his best-ever Grand Prix performance in 3rd.
But that new V10, the new Ferrari V10, I think has done a great job for a brand new engine. It's the first race they run it on. Both of them were very fast. I think Ferrari is definitely on the up and up.
Absolutely. That engine developed by Osamu Goto.
That's not an Italian name.
No, it is not. It's a Japanese name. He worked for Honda for many years, and unlike members of the Japanese corporate culture. He chose to leave Honda, went to work for McLaren for some time, and finally to Ferrari, where he developed this V10 engine. And you're right, it is working awfully well.
I guess he liked tortellini and lambrusco more than he liked sushi and sake. I can't blame him, actually.
I don't think I want to get into the middle of that one.
But that is great. I think for Ferrari now goes out and hires people on their merit, not just a question of what
ancestry.
Ancestry. I think that is one of the biggest things that English teams have always done. They've gone out and picked the best people for the job.
John Barnard, as Damon Hill begins his final lap, John Barnard, who is the technical director at Ferrari, said something interesting recently. He said, people keep wanting Ferrari to be run like a British team. Most of the teams in Formula One, of course, are British. But Ferrari is not that way. It never will be. It needs to be run as an Italian team with perhaps a bit more organization. Placement of resources.
Schumacher will bring that. Schumacher, with his determined method of work, will bring that. And also Barnard is very finicky for detail. And I think you're going to see a Ferrari that's definitely improving. But the team for this weekend has undoubtedly been the Williams. They had both cars that were just unbelievable. And it really is a pity that Villeneuve had to curtail such a great effort because he had an oil leak someplace. But I think he drove brilliantly, and Hill would have had a very, very hard time getting by him. Having said that, Hill looks like he's going to be the winner.
Well, most of our talk today has been about Jacques Villeneuve, and rightly so, but a tip of the helmet to this man, Damon Hill, who has driven strongly. A few thrusts at his teammate when Villeneuve was in the lead, which the French-Canadian parried strongly. I'm sure there will be discussion of that in the Williams garage later on. But it appears that they will salvage a 1-2, and you can't do any better than that. But it will be Damon Hill, who is under so much pressure this year, the best chance he has ever had at the World Championship, and he will begin the season in style with a victory here in Australia, his second straight win in this race.
And he has the same amount that his father did.
14 Grand Prix wins, matching the late Graham Hill. Graham had 2 World Championships. Perhaps this will be Damon Hill's year.
The Williams have continued into 1996 at the same speed they had in 1995. That is really an accomplishment. A brand new car, but maybe the whole secret to it was keeping their #1 driver. Here comes Villeneuve. I think has done a tremendous job. He even showed that he had the poise to bring home a car that was limping along. 1-2 for Williams. What a job.
Congratulations to Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve for their 1-2. It'll be maximum points in the Constructors' Championship for Williams, trying to wrest that title back from the Benetton team. Eddie Irvine matches his best ever career performance in Grand Prix racing with a 3rd, followed by Gerhard Berger, Mika Hakkinen. Welcome back to Mika. And Mika Salo running in 6th. There you see the rest of the classified cars. Pennies, Frentzen, Rosset, Denitz, and Katayama. Congratulations to Ricardo Rosset in his Formula One debut. Points leaders, very simply, Damon Hill, 10-6 for Villeneuve, followed by Irvine, Berger, Hakkinen, and Salo. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams-Renault picks up the maximum of 16 points. We're out of here. We'll be back from Brazil on the 30th. I'm Bob Varsha for Eddie Cheever. Thanks for being with us. We take you now live to Tom Mees and Jimmy Dykes in Nevada.